Hello, you're currently watching a segmented speedrun of Link to the Past Reverse Boss Order No Exploration Glitch. So let me go through that and explain what that means. This is a segmented speedrun. That means that this was not done in a single segment. Instead, I took each individual room of the game and optimized them individually. There are a total of 314 segments throughout this run. You can actually see how many attempts each individual room took me in the bottom right of the screen. The category this is Reverse Boss Order No Exploration Glitch. So Reverse Boss Order is pretty self-explanatory. The first boss I have to beat is Ganon, the second boss I have to beat is Aghanim 2, and then Trinex, Vitreous, and so on and so forth. No Exploration Glitch refers to an extremely powerful glitch that allows walking through collision inside dungeons and caves. Exploration glitch runs are interesting in their own right. Personally, they're a bit too game-breaking for my tastes, so I prefer to run without them. I also have this nice visualization on the right side of the screen, and it's probably a good idea just to familiarize everyone with it now, when it's working properly. That way, when things break horribly in the later part of a run, we'll be able to understand what's going on. So, we have a mini-map, pretty self-explanatory. The blue box is the camera position, and the red box shows which quarter of the screen Link is in. Below the minimap, we have what the game state is, what area of the game we're in, Hyrule Castle, how many attempts each screen took me, as well as a timer and control display. I'll explain the top part of the screen, all those boxes, in a bit. They're a little bit more complicated. Also, pits are highlighted in red on the minimap. Throughout this early section of a run, you'll see me doing a lot of extra inputs on the D-pad, this room in particular. This is a technique called pumping. If you are moving either up or to the left and you mash diagonals on the D-pad, you move very slightly faster. It's a very marginal amount of time save, but it does save a couple seconds over the course of a run. At the top of the visualization are the ancilla slots. Ancilla are a bit tricky to explain, but you can think of them as essentially items we use will appear there. So the boomerang is an ancilla, the hookshot is an ancilla. Some things that aren't strictly items are ancilla, such as the sparkles on Link's sword, and as we will see here, picking up an item is actually its own ancilla. So, the ancilla are divided into two rows. The top row is meant for things like the lamp and boomerang and hookshot and all these items that we will use. The bottom is just meant for the sparkles on Link's sword. There's also some extra information there, some directions and numbers. That will be explained when we actually get to the glitches that involve that. But for now, we're just backtracking through Hyrule Castle. Throughout the first half of this run, we're going to be pretty much putting together a toolkit of glitch items. So the start of this run isn't glitchy, and as we go through the run, it's just going to get progressively glitchier and glitchier. And the first item we're going to add to that toolkit is the bombs. Now, I actually came up with like 6 different ways of getting bombs quickly, and the one I ended up settling on is a bit silly. It's not something that you would ever see in a single segment run. I need to get 50 rupees to buy bombs, and the fastest way I was able to find to get those rupees is just by getting RNG rupee drops from the rats in the sewers here. Now, I need to quickly explain how item drops work in this game. They are anything but random. The first item that a rat drops will always be a blue rupee, the second item will always be a green rupee, and the third item will always be a blue rupee, so on and so forth. Essentially, what I need to do to get 50 rupees is to get 9 item drops from rats. Now, each of these item drops is in itself a 50-50 chance. So, obviously, that's is luck that is not realistic in a single segment setting. When I'm able to do each room individually, I don't need to get all that perfect luck all at once. So I believe you will see the red rupee drop in the next room. A lot of this run was a learning process. I wouldn't have considered myself a particularly experienced Link to the Past speedrunner before doing the speedrun, so a lot of this was learning in the process of making this. I think I improved a lot over the process of making this, but it does mean that some of these early rooms I didn't do the best job of manipulating RNG. We're coming up to something very interesting in this room. I am going to boomerang and then switch to lamp, use the lamp. And what that did is the boomerang spawned in Ancilla slot 4, the boomerang tink of it hitting an object spawned in Ancilla slot 3, and the lamp spawned in Ancilla slot 2. So placing a lamp in Ancilla slot 2 sets a variable called the search index to a high number. I'll explain what that means in a second. I should also mention, I did a little damage boost to get in this door. Because of the way that this cutscene works, that actually saves around a second in lag frames, just because Link's shield isn't visible. So now I'm just gonna go quickly buy bombs, and I should probably start explaining misslotting. So, misslotting is a glitch that works by manipulating how that Ancilla table works. So I already set the search index to a high value by putting a lamp in slot 2. What misslotting is putting a Ancilla that is only supposed to appear in slots 0 through 4, like a bomb or a hookshot, into a high slot, which is only meant for the sparkles on Link's sword or the sparkles on the ice rod, or really just sparkles. So you can misslot an object by holding your sword out with a high search index and spawning a bunch of items. So you're going to see that here I'm going to use a bomb splash into water to misslot a bomb. So there's a bomb in slot 9 now, and that is going to cause some data corruption. So you're just going to see me start moving up across the overworld. This is a glitch called Overworld Conveyor. It works because the data corruption that is caused by taking damage from a slot 9 bomb modifies a variable that is used for conveyor movement in the underworld, and that value isn't cleared unless you are moving in the underworld, so we can just move around. Also, this transition takes me into the Lost Woods because reasons, and I'm actually positioned perfectly below a hole in the Lost Woods, so I'm going to fall into the Lost Wood hideout, and then this overworld conveyor state doesn't actually clear until I move in the underworld, so I'm able to keep this clipping state into the underworld, and I'm able to use the very useful fact that all the caves and dungeons, or at least most of them, are on the same map. So I can just clip next from Lost Woods hideout into Misery Mire. They just happen to be next to each other. The way they're laid out is related, but only somewhat, to their actual positions. I also set the search index again there with the slot 2 lamp. I am here to add another item to my glitch item set, the Cane of Samaria. This one is a very potent glitch item. When you break a Samaria block, it spawns 4 projectiles. These are all Ancilla, so I can use Samaria to manipulate the Ancilla table. It's also a very powerful item to misslot. We'll get to that in a little bit. It also is used for a glitch called Samaria Transition Corruptions. If you push a Samaria block into a screen transition, bad things happen. I do not have a time to explain further. I should also explain the reason we were able to open the big chest and actually get Samaria is because, as far as the game's concerned, we're not actually in Misery Mire, we're inside a cave, and when the game checks whether you have the cave big key, it actually does that by checking the escape big key, which we picked up at the start of a run. You're now going to see me do Samaria transition corruptions. Again, that's pushing a Samaria block into a screen transition. What you need to know is it's going to move me a screen up, so you're going to see me start flying up across the minimap as I do that. So I just did 7 Samaria transitions. I'm in a Tower of Hera screen now. It doesn't reload the collision, so it's still there. And then I did a clip down into a Swamp Palace, which the way that works is just diagonal collision doesn't really do its job most of the time. And since I'm still in a cave, I'm able to pick up the hook shot. That's another powerful glitch item. And then, because if you look at the minimap, the game has lost track of which quadrant I'm in, which is going to break this screen transition and is going to let me get the Tower of Hera big chest. I have the Moon Pearl now. A lot of stuff just happened very, very quickly. But what that amounted to is I got the Cane of Samaria, the hookshot, and the Moon Pearl from all that. Now that I have Moon Pearl, I can start doing stuff in the Dark World, although I am going to get Mirror on the way there. The way I'm going to do that is with another misslotted bomb into Overworld Conveyor. So that one I triggered by taking damage from the guard instead of a bomb, and this is just gonna let me clip up really quick to the cave where I can get Mirror. There are a couple ways in here, that just happens to be the fastest. I picked up Hookshot earlier. I should explain how that works. Hookshot is another powerful glitch item. Misslotting glitches, either misslotting the hookshot or misslotting a Samaria block, can actually cause the hookshot to pull Link through walls. That'll be used extensively in the later part of the run. And as I'm getting the mirror, we're actually coming up to what I would consider one of the hardest screens in the run. Some really RNG-intensive movement at the front here, and then I'm going to do another clip, which these clips through the diagonal collision use a number of frame-perfect inputs. I'm using sword slashes to buffer a lot of these frame-perfect inputs, but they are still incredibly difficult. And you'll see me do that here, and I'm actually going to jump over the bottom of the screen here and wrap around all the way to the top. So if you look at the mini-map, you'll see what's actually going on. It looks like I'm walking through walls, but it's just a messed up camera. And then you'll see me use a mirror as I hit a screen transition here. There's a screen transition in the middle of the screen. I do not have enough time to explain why, and now I'm gonna head to Skull Woods. I actually need to unwrap the camera before I get into Skull Woods. If I don't, I'll either get an infinitely long screen transition or I'll just get sent to the Chris Houlihan room when I try to fall into Skull Woods. So now that the camera is unwrapped, I can go into Skull Woods, and I'm just picking up the fire rod while I'm here so I can use it on Trinex. This just happens to be the most convenient time to pick it up. This early game, I just have so much stuff to talk about. I realize I'm probably going information overload on everything. This run is just so complicated. Here I'm currently picking up a key. I'm going to use this in like 25 minutes. It's just the best time to pick it up now. And then I'm going to do another Samaria transition corruption. And this one is going to do some interesting things with the chests here. The game actually ties chest contents to what screen we're on. So since, as far as the game's concerned, we're actually on the screen above where we are visually. So I actually opened the chest in the screen above where I was visually, which happened to be the big key. So that's just a really quick way of getting the fire rod. I should explain something about the hookshot, since we use it a few times here. As I use the hookshot, it's going to appear in Ancilla slot 4 a few times, and you'll see it highlighted in blue. The blue highlight indicates what slot the hookshot is reading data from. For now, that's going to be the hookshot. Later on, we're going to do some really game-breaking glitches to cause the hookshot to read its data improperly. Also, the pink highlight just indicates that that slot can be misslotted into if we were to do a misslotting glitch, which we actually are now. I'm going to use Samaria projectiles to misslot another bomb and do Overworld Conveyor one more time. And that dark red highlight you saw on the bomb there in Ancilla slot 9 indicated that that is a misslotted object, misslotted Ancilla. I'm just going to get Tempered Sword right now. Very useful item, need it to beat Ganon. I'll be getting a couple things in the area along the way, getting a bomb refill since I'm currently out of bombs, and I'm also going to be doing the first hook push in the run here. There are a bunch of variations on Glitch. They all revolve around manipulating Ancilla to use the hookshot to pull Link in a way it shouldn't. So I'm going to interrupt a hookshot by buying an item, and then I'm going to cause the game to fail to load a hookshot, use the previous hookshot, and I'm in Ice Rod Cave now. So, essentially, the way that worked is, if I can get a hookshot stuck in place, I can reuse that hookshot in a different place. So that was done by filling up the top row of Ancilla slots. I filled it up with a hookshot and 4 Samaria projectiles. Then I tried to spawn a hookshot. The hookshot failed to load. At that point, the game realized we were using the hookshot, so it just used the hookshot from earlier. And that basic concept is going to be used over the course of this run. I recognize that a lot of this goes a little too fast to follow. If you're interested in reading a little bit more about the details of how this works internally, I'm going to have a link in the description that has a lot more details, actually explaining a lot of the complexity of how these things work, because a lot of these hook pushes are actually incredibly execution heavy in their own right, as well as just being difficult to explain. Now that I have Tempered Sword, I actually have nearly every item I need for the rest of the run, so it's time to start killing bosses. Obviously our first boss is going to be Ganon, so what's the plan for beating Ganon? We need to find a way into the Ganon fight without killing Aghanim 2. So of course we're going to do that by going to Hyrule Castle and throwing a bomb, taking damage from that bomb, and hookshotting into a pot. Oh wow, would you look at that, we're at the Ganon fight. The pot just takes you there. That isn't like a wrong warp or anything, the pot just takes you there. If you were able to get in there with a walk through walls hack, it would take you to the Ganon fight. Don't ask me why. So we're Ganon fight, I try and do both first and second phase in one cycle, which is, it's brutally difficult in the best of circumstances, but I'm coming into this fight without boots, so it's even harder. And this fight is so hard that I actually took some pretty significant time loss here. These warps are random, and I had to settle for a fight that had 2 warps on it. That's about 4 seconds of time loss. The first, second, and fourth phases are all just so ridiculously difficult that I had to settle for an imperfect fight. So I'm going to do a couple quick hits on him as this phase starts. I'm then going to do Torch Glitch, light the torch before the other one goes out. I also set the search index on the Torch Glitch, and now I'm going to start spinning him as he warps, which allows for damaging Ganon with the silvers. I'm timing triple hits by lighting the lamp at certain times. There are some more aggressive strategies you could go for on this cycle, but this fight is just so ridiculously hard. This fight is far from perfect, but I'm really proud of the fight I was able to get. As you can see, this took me 946 attempts. This was one of, if not the hardest screen in the entire run. There's so much I have notes for this. There's so much I wanted to explain on the Ganon fight, because there's so much complexity in this fight, and I just didn't have time. The next boss we need to do is Aghanim 2, and similarly to the Ganon fight, we're not gonna go to that fight the normal way. We're gonna go to the Eternal Rock. Gonna start doing that by doing the same clip I did earlier to get in the Dark World. This time I am instead just going to enter Tower of Hera and leave to get the camera back into the right position, and then we're going to get to just one of the most ridiculously difficult screens in the entire run. I am still shocked I managed to do this as well as I did, to be honest. This screen, I don't know how many frame perfect inputs are on this screen. It is more than 10. one frame diagonal taps are brutal, but this trick just lets us really quickly get to the middle of Turtle Rock. I can just jump off here, and the middle of Turtle Rock is extremely useful, because there's one room here which takes you to Aghanim 2, the exact same way that Pot in Hyrule Castle took us to Ganon. This isn't really a wrong warp or anything, it's just the lava in that big pipe room takes you to the Aghanim 2 fight. Do not ask me why, I'm very glad it happens. Aghanim 2 is a brutal fight. I'm trying to redirect all 3 projectiles into him on both cycles. Aghanim 2 wasn't my best fight before doing this run, and this took so many tries to even get one attempt. And even then, it's not over. Even after I get a triple 2-cycle Aghanim fight, I have to do this clip out of the arena, and you see the bat that spawns? This cutscene actually starts when that bat is off screen, so by doing this clip and walking outside the arena, it's possible to save a couple seconds on the fight just by getting the bat off screen faster and shortening the cutscene. Let's see, next boss, Trinex. These bosses start going really quickly once we have all the items we need. So, once again, we're headed to Turtle Rock. This time, we're actually going to head to the backside of Turtle Rock, and I'm going to get there by doing a new glitch called a Samaria hook push. So this is going to be done by misslotting a Samaria block. So I'm going to oversimplify this explanation a bit, but essentially, misslotting a Samaria block causes the hookshot to read its data from slot 0. So by putting useful data in slot 0, in this case a sword beam, I can control what direction the hookshot takes me. So now when I hookshot this pot, it moves me up because I fired that sword beam from earlier up. I'm going to leave and re-enter the dungeon. I need to be in Turtle Rock to get the crystal, instead of just a cave. Now, for the next hook push I want to do, the 76 frames of movement that a sword beam gives you isn't actually enough, so I'm going to do a different type of hook push. This time I'm going to throw the boomerang up left, which the boomerang and the hook shot actually share some variables, so by throwing the boomerang in a specific direction, I can modify what data a stuck hook shot reads its data from. So I'm going to misslot a hookshot to get a hookshot stuck in place. Then I'm going to throw the boomerang up left. I'm going to fill all the ancilla slots, use the hookshot, it fails to load, pulls me up. The hook slot is 10, it's actually reading it from an out of bounds slot. Trinex is actually one of the easiest bosses in the run. Just Fire Rod, Ice Rod, go to town on it. Samaria hook pushing is going to be the main glitch we use in this run, so it's worth actually explaining how they work in a little bit more detail than hookshot reads data from slot 0. So the way this works is that a Samaria block that has been misslotted in slot 9 decreases the hook slot, that is to say, it decreases which slot the hookshot reads its data from by 1 on each frame until it reaches 0. So what that means is that if you have a slot 9 block and you use the hookshot and it spawns in slot 4, it'll read 1 frame of movement from slot 4, 1 frame of movement from slot 3, 1 frame from slot 2, from slot 1, and then it'll just keep reading from slot 0. So by putting a useful value in slot 0, and you can see all the directions and durations below the slots, we can control how the hookshot moves us. Now, if the value in slot 1 through 3 is 0, the hookshot will actually end early. So on that first hook push I did to get into Turtle Rock, I actually had to manipulate the values in slots 1 through 3 to make sure the hook push doesn't end early. There's another way to do that, which we'll do on one of the hook pushes in Misery Mire, which is where we're going next. So Mire is actually a bit of a problem in this run. The Ether Medallion is needed to enter Misery Mire. To get Ether, you need the Book of Medora. To get the Book of Medora, you need to have Pegasus Boots. To have Pegasus Boots, you need to be Eastern Palace, which is the first dungeon in the game. That's a problem. So the way we're going to deal with this is to enter one dungeon and then beat the boss of a different dungeon. So I'm going to be entering Eastern Palace and then going from Eastern Palace to Misery Mire. And that's actually going to give me the green pendant since, again, I'm in Eastern Palace, not in Misery Mire. Have an exciting glitch called a quadrant glitch that I'm going to use to shortcut Eastern Palace. I'm going to be doing a spin across the exact middle of a tile, and if you watch the red box on the minimap as I do this, the game has lost track of which quadrant I'm in. It actually moved me over the quadrant twice in the same frame, and that's going to break screen transitions pretty badly. The camera's messed up now, and I'm actually doing some pretty careful camera manipulation for this entire segment so that when I walk up through this door at the top of this room, it's actually going to undo this glitch and I can just proceed as normal. So this door obviously isn't going to work properly, but now I'm in the right quadrant, the camera is fixed, and I can continue playing the game as normal. So that's just a really quick way to get the Eastern Palace big key and get one of the final items I'm going to get in this game, the bow. I'm doing another hook push to get into Misery Mire. This one works a little bit similarly to the ones where I've gotten a hookshot stuck, except I'm just going to be doing it really, really fast. So, this slot a hookshot, and now, oh, I'm in the Misery Mire now, really fast. So, the way that works is I was able to just use the hookshot a third time before the second hookshot connects, and that just automatically reuses the hookshot from earlier. There's no need to fill up the top slots again, which is what I've done on the previous hook pushes where I've gotten a stuck hook. Some pretty simple rooms as I go through Misery Mire. Some rooms here that were actually some of my least favorite in the entire game to do. Just absolutely ridiculous amount of pumping in the next couple screens. Then I'm going to do another Samaria hook push to shortcut the path to Vitreous. On this one, I'm going to time a pause as the hookshot connects with the target, the hookshot that I intend to use for the hook push. So, miss slot Samaria, slot 0 beam, use the hookshot, pause. And so what that pause did is the hook slot decrementing, going from slot 4 to slot 0, still occurs when you're in the pause menu, so I can skip having to manipulate slots 1 through 3 by doing that. And now we're coming to Vitreous. This is a brutally difficult fight. I have to use all of my health to get this, count the HP of all of these eyes to make sure I don't waste any arrows, and then I'm going to be doing a really precise trick here, going to be mis-slotting a block, having the pendant spawn in slot 1, and that skips the fanfare that occurs when you beat a boss. That works just by having a mis-slotted block 8 slots higher than the pendant. And that was actually incredibly difficult because I can't open the menu after the boss is dead, so I had to shoot an arrow, menu to lamp, use the lamp 3 times, and then menu to Samaria, all before the arrow made contact with the boss. Since I have the green pendant now, I can actually just go back and get the boots. The boots are really the final item, not strictly the final item, but the final glitch item in the run. Once we have boots, things are going to go even faster, so enjoy this cutscene because it's one of the last breaks I get in the entire run, other than other cutscenes, I guess. I have a note for the next section, which says, "This split is impossible to commentate," because it is. Now that we have boots, things are going to break extremely fast. I'm going to start off by doing a glitch called Super Speed by using the hookshot and boots on the same frame, and that's going to let me just do the same clip I did earlier really fast. I'm now going to be going down Dark Death Mountain, and I'm going to be doing a clip that, because of the way jumping works in this game, it's actually just going to like screen wrap me across the entire map. I highly suggest watching the mini map for this point. The camera's gonna get really messed up, and that moves me so far down across the overworld that when I screen transition, I'm actually at the very bottom of the map. I'm then going to go over around the Swamp Palace areas, going to do an off-screen clip here actually, which was quite difficult. Then I'm going to be using the mirror on the same frame I hit a screen transition. At this point, the camera just gives up entirely, and would you look at that, I'm at Ice Palace. I'm now going to do another clips on a diagonal wall, similarly to the ones I did earlier. Since I have boots, it's just gonna go ridiculously fast now. I forgot to mention that arrows are really weird. Arrows have really weird directions. They don't really correspond to the directions you would expect they would have. That's going to be really important in a bit, but first off I have a trick called Icebreaker. This trick should also be done in real life. Coming up to the most complex hook push in the run, the arrows having weird directions is going to be really relevant here, so I'm going to start setting this up by putting an arrow in slot 0. That's actually going to have a diagonal direction. I'm then going to misslot a Samaria block, put a spin in slot 0, interrupt that spin by taking damage from a bomb, and all of that's going to let me do this. That is far and away the most complex hook push in the run. That is absolutely absurd. We have another ridiculous hook push immediately afterward. This hook push is similar to the one in Turtle Rock, where a sword beam actually doesn't give me enough distance to get to the room I want to go to, so I'm actually going to do 2 hook pushes here. So one hook push here, which I'm going to interrupt midway through by pushing against a Samaria block. That's just a glitchless mechanic. And then I'm going to set up a new hook push to get all the way down to Cold Stare. I'm going to use beams to damage Cold Stare, which is the thing you can do by manipulating the timing with Fire Rod and beams so that the beams actually get Fire Rod damage, and then just absolutely ridiculously fast quick kill on Cold Stare here. If you understood that, I'm impressed. This is probably the most complex section of the entire run. It's ridiculous. Something I should actually mention here is that when you get an item, that item is actually an ancilla. So you can see the 32 in slot 4 right now. That actually corresponded to the crystal we just picked up. So hypothetically, if you had a glitch that could modify ancilla slots, you could actually manipulate what item you get from picking up a crystal. Now, that would require a few things. That would require it would only be possible in the boss arena, and you would need a hookshotable block. Fortunately, there's exactly one screen in the entire game that meets those requirements. We'll get to that in a bit. Going to be doing super speed again. This time I'm going to be doing it with a sword spin. And I'm going to just be doing the same glitch I did earlier to get to Skull Woods in order to get to Thieves Town really quick. I'm actually going to skip unwrapping the camera a bit here. If I manipulate my camera position, I can actually have this screen transition take me further down into Kakariko. And I do need Thieves Town to at least be on screen at the very bottom there to pull that, but that lets me just get into Thieves Town really quick. Thieves Town is a fun dungeon. I'm actually not going to be picking up the big key here, so we get some fun big key skips here, and that starts with a hook push in this room. I'm gonna kill this enemy. That's literally just for leg reduction. This hook push is incredibly laggy, but that's just gonna let me get up into this room really quick. And next room has a terrifyingly high attempt counter. Don't worry about it. That room's bad. Don't worry about it. Actually have some fairly glitchless gameplay for once. And just gonna go back over here. I am going to be doing a hook push in a bit, but I need to be at full health here, and that's why I'm swapping to hookshot. If you hookshot a heart on specific frames, you can actually get 2 drops from the heart instead of 1. So that just was the quickest way I could find to get back to full health. Not at all single segment viable, but nothing in this run is about being single segment viable. Gonna have another hook push here, and this one is just going to go over to the side to rescue the maiden, setting it up now. And here I'm actually using the fact that when I contact the maiden, it actually cancels the hook push, which is very useful. Otherwise, I have to do something like I did on the second hook push there, which is I did some careful positioning of the beam I was using to do the hook push. If I don't do that, the hook push actually sends me into exploration glitch. So now it's time for the blind fight. This one is pretty easy. I kind of just fluked this fight really hard while I was still learning it, so this isn't actually a very well executed fight. I just kind of do a random spin on the second phase because I messed up, but it ended up being really fast, like genuinely shockingly fast. So you know what, I'll take it. And to reiterate on the items, you'll see the heart in slot 4 here and the crystal appear in slot 3. So on the Mothula fight, we're actually going to be manipulating that by basically doing just a 2-frame long Samaria hook push to manipulate the data in slot 3. Have a quick second to try and explain how that works during this cutscene. So, the hookshot reads its direction from whatever slot it's reading from. So with the Samaria hook push, it'll read 1 frame from slot 4, decrease the value in slot 4 by 1. Read 1 frame of movement from slot 3, decrease the value in slot 3 by 1. And then in the example we're about to do, it'll then see the value in slot 2 is 0 and stop. So we'll just be doing a bunch of really short hook pushes, essentially, to modify the item that has dropped in slot 3. This does end up in a really complex Mothula fight, because if you spawn a sword beam in slot 4, it will delete a Samaria block. So I basically have to defeat Mothula without normal sword slashes, which is just absolutely brutally difficult. It's not at all single segment viable, and it is second hardest room in this run. Fun graphical corruption from that Samaria transition corruption. And now it's time for the Mothula fight. This fight is absolutely ridiculous. Do a miss slot at the start of a fight, and then I just beat the boss by running into the boss. So, really fast fight, and then I set up some data before the heart drops, and then I'm just going to repeatedly hookshot this block, and you can see the item changing. Now, I'm actually soft-locked now, so I had to additionally set up a hook push in advance to get out of a room. And there you have it. That's the most important room in this entire run. Getting ether like this just helps so much with overworld rooting. And I'm just going to do another hook push to get out. This hook push puts me in exploration glitch. Now, this category is no exploration glitch. Overworld exploration glitch is not really a very powerful glitch. It basically just makes it so that enemies don't hit me. It's considered separate from underworld exploration glitch. Here I'm going to do a boots clip. Which somehow that's the first time I'm doing that in the run. Boots let you get through diagonal walls pretty easily, and quick photosensitivity warning for the next part. I'll let you know when it's over. The rain here doesn't load properly, so the graphics are just really screwed up. So getting ether early like this just lets me come back down to Mire now and do Mire in one trip. Any other route is a lot slower in overworld routing. Photosensitivity warning over. Any other route is a lot slower in overworld routing. The downside to this route is that we actually haven't beaten Skull Woods. We do need to pick up the Skull Woods crystal at some point in this run. Because of reasons that you'll see in a bit, that isn't too big a problem. But it does mean that this run, despite being by far the fastest route in the overworld, is not the fastest route inside dungeons. While we're redoing Mire here, I'd actually like to give a slightly better explanation of how Samaria transition corruptions work. So, the idea is you push a Samaria block into a transition. The way the movement code works is you end up crossing the transition, and then the Samaria block actually pushes you back over the transition, causing you to hit the transition twice in one frame. This, first of all, just moves you up a screen, since you're hitting two screen transitions. It also triggers a separate glitch called a transition corruption. So, if you look at the game state, it's currently 700. The game uses different numbers to keep track of what game state you're in. Now, the two types of screen transitions are game states 1 and 2. And because Link to the Past is a very poorly programmed game, the way it sets these values is not hard-coded. It instead sets these values by adding them. So if you manage to do two things on the same frame, a third unrelated thing will happen. In this case, if you try to hit two screen transitions at the same time, you will instead spawn holes in the screen. Now, there are some screens in the game where this is actually intended behavior. On screens where it's not, it can cause the graphical corruption that you saw earlier in Skull Woods, or it can just spawn holes that you can fall into, which is what you're going to see here. I'm going to be doing a Samaria transition corruption, and then I'm going to be doing a separate transition corruption where I both die and fall into a hole on the same frame. So, see here, Samaria transition corruption, that's going to spawn a bunch of holes, which you can actually see on the minimap. And then I'm going to die as I fall into this hole, and that's going to cause a fairy to revive me, because again, you do two things, and a third completely unrelated thing would happen. And wow, would you look at that, we're at the Argus fight! Yeah, so this all is just a really, really fast way of getting to Argus, and I'm not actually using the hookshot to beat Argus, I'm just scrolling the puffs off screen, and that triggers the second phase, and I can just beat Argus really quickly like that. And I'm going to be doing another one of the fanfare skips you saw earlier. So, this is the fun of this route, is that I just get to beat Desert Palace at Swamp Palace, and then I get to go in Swamp Palace, and I get to beat Swamp Palace at a different dungeon. So I basically get to just chain all these dungeons together and skip any navigation on the overworld, and it just ends up being just incredibly fast. So I've already beaten Swamp Palace, and I've beaten it at the Mothula fight, so I'm going to reappear at Skull Woods, and then I can beat Skull Woods. This is a really useful property of just being able to leave Skull Woods unbeaten, is that I can use Skull Woods in the middle of this dungeon chain, and being able to do that is actually going to make Palace of Darkness, which is the next dungeon I need to do, or well, the next boss I need to do, really, really fast. I should mention, I actually came up with a bunch of different potential routes for mid-game. I'm not confident that this is the fastest one, but all of the routes I timed ended up within like 10 seconds of each other, so it's difficult for me to be confident that any one route is faster than the other. I do think this is the fastest. It's definitely the coolest route. Mirror here because complex technical reasons that I don't want to get into, and now we have one of the most difficult screens in the entire run. This is essentially two really hard screens in a row, but there isn't a screen transition between them. I actually go through this screen transition, so I have to do these back to back. I'm doing another Samaria transition corruption here, but since the door is so deep, I basically have to do a bunch of off-screen movement. And then I open the map here, which just clears all the graphical corruption. Not strictly necessary, but I did not want to deal with that being there. And then I'm just gonna do another hook push because this screen is horribly difficult. And would you look at that? I'm in the Helmasaur King fight. Now we have a problem. Well, we don't have a hammer, so we have to kill Helmasaur King with bombs. I'm going to do this by doing a trick called Murder Bomb, where I use a beam on a mis-slotted bomb, and that's just going to be extend the explosion timer of the bomb, so I can just defeat Helmasaur King with one bomb. Finally have a break to take a little breath. I've said most of what I want to say about the routing involved in this run, and I have a few more cutscenes to talk, so I'd actually just like to talk a little bit about how this run was made. So there are two ways you could go about making a run like this. You could either go through every screen on the practice hack, which is an amazing tool, and use the times from that and splice them together. I decided not to do that because A, it's just a complete pain from a video editing perspective, and B, I really wanted this visualization. I think it's so necessary to understand what's going on in this run. So I instead recorded this as a task and wrote some tools to help time it, and we'll continue this discussion in the next Crystal cutscene. So I'm just going to go straight back from Palace of Darkness to Skull Woods because I do still need the crystal from Palace of Darkness. So I'm just going to do two quick hook pushes. This hook push is really fun. I'm using the Samaria to knock down the Gibdos so they don't hit me while I'm setting up these glitches. That one's so funny. Ridiculously difficult. Do not do that strat in an actual run. And ears open. Listen closely. Isn't it beautiful? I don't know why that happens. So, back to how this was made. I made this by recording it as a task, and I wrote some tooling to help me time everything and make it. And the downside of doing it this way is that I can't go back and fix things. If I noticed some mistake 10 minutes ago in the run, I would have had to redo the entire run to fix that mistake. So, a little bit of a blow to my ego, I suppose, that I really just had to accept some imperfections in this run. I think especially towards the start of this run, I took a different approach than I would at the end. There's some rooms that are just much less optimized than they would be if I had done them later. There are also a few rooms that are probably better optimized because I just really grinded them out at the start. I also improved a lot at this game over the course of making it. Let's see. Aghanim's Tower. So, at this point we have all of the crystals and two of the pendants. All we need left is Tower of Hera, so from this point out, it is just all-out boss rush. We don't even really need to be worried about beating dungeons beyond Tower of Hera. And our quickest way to Aghanim 1 is actually through Tower of Hera. I'm going to be doing a similar thing as I did in Skull Woods, where I just bypass this screen transition. So I pick up a bomb in order to get on the wrong side of a transition, and again, look at the mini-map. Camera's not super useful here, but I'm at the top of Aghanim's Tower here. Something about the way we do this really messes up the collision here, so you can kind of just walk through the diagonal walls, and not a lot to say on this boss fight. This is actually kind of a really good boss fight. Beyond just getting 0 blue balls, I also got just really short warps. Aghanim warps between each attack, and I got really short warps on most of these. So this is just a remarkably fast boss fight, even for a 0 blue balls. Not intentional, I actually had to redo this fight because I had to redo like 3 minutes to fix something, but simple enough fight. Back to little discussion of how this was made. I think that if I was to have the option of redoing the screens that I felt were weak, I could probably save around 10 seconds across this run. Maybe more like 20 if I went really hard and like tried to redo the Ganon fight. But the real potential time save lies less in small optimizations like that and more in routing. I don't know of any routes that are faster than this one, but fundamentally, the nature of being the only person who has seriously rooted a category is that you're gonna miss stuff. I am sure there are some routing errors in this that I am not at all aware of, and I have no idea how much time they could possibly save. We're coming up to the end of the run now. We really don't have any more cutscenes, and we're just gonna blitz through the last few remaining bosses. I can skip pretty much all of Hera by using spin speed and doing a clip very similar to the one I did to get to Ganon. And that's just gonna put me at the top of Tower of Hera. And the Boulderm fight's gonna go really quickly. I'm gonna do the same fanfare skip trick that I did on the other two Light World bosses, Vitreous and Argus. I love coming in here with a sword that isn't Fighter's sword. So next up is Lanmola's, and the way we're going to get through Lanmola's is, of course, by clipping from Tower of Hera into Castle Sewers, and then clipping from Castle Sewers into Desert Palace. You know, normal stuff. You're used to it at now. You've watched 50 minutes of this run already. This shouldn't surprise you. But little bomb clip there to just damage us into collision, and then we can do clips similar to the ones we've done earlier, kill these enemies just to get a heart drop back because I need it for this hook push. And this hook push is very fun. Neither a Samaria hook push or a stuck hook push works. So of course I do both of it at the same time by getting a block and 2 hook shots misslotted, and that lets me essentially do a Samaria hook push remotely without having to hook shot something. And now time for Lanmos. This was a very interesting fight with magic considerations because I only got to use 1 fire rod during the entire fight, so I had to really figure out how am I going to do this fight fast. Ended up having to settle for a 2 cycle, but still a really strong fight. And now we just have Armos Knights left. And we're gonna be going to Eastern Palace the same way you've already seen 2 times in this run, really. Although I do a boots clip to get in, so you get to see how much faster these boots clips are than the really precise clips I was doing earlier on in the run. These just work by pressing boots and dash on the same frame. Sorry, boots and direction on the same frame. And then Eastern Palace is a remarkably fast dungeon. I'm using a fire rod instead of beams to set the duration for the hook push, because I'm not at full health, and that just brings me straight to Armos. Yuzu Armos. Nothing really special on this fight. This is like one of the only fights in the game that is the same as the NMG speedrun. And that's every boss in the game done. That's every pendant, every crystal. All that's left to do now is beat the game. So of course I'm just gonna go straight to back to the Ganon fight and go do that. One more super speed to get up Ganon's castle really fast. And this might be a faster fight than you're used to. Obviously we're not doing the fight, we're just hook pushing past it. You should expect that by now. And there you have it. Reverse boss order, no exploration glitch, segmented, 53 minutes, 42 seconds. I am pretty happy with this run. The current world record for reverse boss order is 52 minutes and 42 seconds. I might be off by a second or two on that, but it really says something about both how much time a segmented run is able to save and how well I did this, that I only lost a minute to a run that uses far more game-breaking glitches than this one. The current record for this category, single segment, is somewhere in the 120 range. To my knowledge, I'm one of only 2 people who have ever run it, and that could probably be brought down to about 110, maybe even 105 if I really put work into it, but that would follow a significantly different route. I think it would be interesting in its own right, but I'm really happy I got to show this frankly incredibly silly route off in one form or another.